British Rail had a reputation, and most of it was unfair. Yes, the dieselization program of the 1950s and 60s was rushed. Yes, some designs were ordered before they were ready and retired just as they hit their stride. But buried inside that complicated history are 10 diesel locomotives that were genuinely extraordinary. Machines that redefined what a British express could do, lasted decades longer than expected, and built the kind of loyalty that very few mechanical objects ever manage. 10 locomotives, all diesel, all unmistakably British Rail. Number 10, Class 20, English Electric, Type 1, 1957. The Class 20 looks like a diesel locomotive designed by someone who stopped halfway through. The cab is at one end only, so two Class 20s working together always face away from each other, nose to tail, like bookends that got confused. One of the more unusual operational arrangements in British railway history. And yet, 128 were built. Many ran for 40 years, hauling nuclear flash trains and aggregate workings on routes where reliability mattered more than elegance. Think of the Class 20 as the Land Rover Defender of British diesel. Unglamorous, functional, and still going long after everything flashier had been retired. Several Class 20s are still operational in preservation today. A locomotive from 1957 still running in the 2020s. That kind of longevity earns a place on any list of icons, regardless of how unusual the cab arrangement is. Number 9, Class 37, English Electric Type 3, 1960. If you wanted to pick one British Rail diesel that sounds the way a diesel locomotive is supposed to sound, the Class 37 is the answer. The English Electric 12S VT engine at its heart produces a note at full power that enthusiasts have been recording and arguing about for 60 years. Loud, distinctive, the kind of sound that carries across a valley and makes you stop and look. 309 were built between 1960 and 1965, working passenger and freight from Cornwall to the far north of Scotland. On the West Highland Line, the combination of scenery and Class 37 engines created a travel experience that some passengers rate among the best on any railway anywhere in the world. Many Class 37s are still in freight service today, more than 60 years after the first one entered traffic. The locomotive that proved English Electric knew exactly what it was doing and kept proving it for 6 decades. Number 8, Class 52, Western, 1961. The Western region of British Rail went its own way on almost everything in the 1960s, and the Class 52 was the most dramatic expression of that independence. Where the rest of the network moved toward English Electric and Sulzer engines, the Western region chose hydraulic transmission, more common in German locomotives than British ones. The result was a locomotive that looked different, sounded different, and performed differently from anything else on the network. 2,070 horsepower through a Voith hydraulic transmission. On the Great Western Main Line between Paddington and Bristol, the Westerns hauled express trains with a combination of speed and character that their admirers still talk about. 74 were built, all withdrawn by 1977, casualties of British Rail's standardization policy. 7 survive in preservation. The hydraulic experiment did not outlast the standardization drive, but the locomotives it produced left a mark on British railway culture entirely out of proportion to their numbers. Number 7, Class 55, Deltic, 1961. 2 Napier Deltic engines in one locomotive, each a triangular arrangement of 3 opposed piston cylinder banks producing 1,650 horsepower. Combined output 3,300 horsepower, which in 1961 was the equivalent of fitting a Formula One engine into a Ford Transit and expecting the Transit to keep up with everything else on the road. 22 were built. They hauled the Flying Scotsman and the Talisman on the London to Edinburgh, run at speeds and on schedules that steam could not have matched. Journey times that had seemed impossible became routine departures. The Deltics were retired in 1981 when the high-speed train took over. 6 survive in preservation. Hearing one at full power is innate. Experienced people who have had it do not forget. The Napier Deltic engine sounds unlike anything else on rails. Part diesel, part aircraft, completely its own thing. Number 6, Class 50, English Electric Type 4, 1967. The Class 50 arrived in 1967 as a stopgap put on lease by English Electric to cover a power shortage on the West Coast Main Line while electrification works continued northward. Nobody planned for it to become one of the most beloved diesel classes in British rail history. 2,700 horsepower, 50 locomotives. When electrification released them for other work, they moved to the western region and took over the Paddington to Plymouth services. Watching a Class 50 at full power on the seawall at Dawlish, between Exeter and Newton Abbot, in rough weather, became one of those experiences that railway photography was invented for. They were noisy, temperamental, and broke down more than their operators would have liked. But they looked right on that route, and they sounded right. 18 survive in preservation. Enthusiasts who rode them on the Cornish Riviera Express in the 1980s will tell you no other diesel captured that combination of power and atmosphere. We are halfway through, and the machines only get more significant from here. If this list is doing what it should, subscribe now. We cover the machines that define British rail every single week. Now. Number 5. Number 5, Class 47, Brush Type 4, 1962. 512 were built between 1962 and 1968, making the Class 47 the most numerous diesel locomotive class ever constructed for a British railway. They worked everything: passenger expresses, heavy freight, mail trains, royal train duties. If a task required a Type 4 diesel in Britain between 1965 and 2005, there was a reasonable chance a Class 47 was doing it. Think of the Class 47 the way you think of a professional all-rounder in cricket. Not the headline act, not the record breaker. The person who holds the innings together when everyone else has gone. 2,580 horsepower from a Sulzer 12L DA28 engine, available everywhere. Reliable enough for the most important duties. Around 100 survive in various states of preservation or active use. They hauled the royal train. They worked overnight sleeper services. They were everywhere for 40 years. The Class 47 defined British rail not by being exceptional, but by being indispensable. Number 4, Class 40, English Electric Type 4, 1958. The Class 40 was the locomotive Britain used while it worked out what British diesel should actually be. Introduced in 1958 as one of the first generation of mainline diesels, it went straight to work on the West Coast and East Coast main lines, hauling the express passenger services that steam had just vacated. 200 were built. Think of the Class 40 as the first chapter of a book that eventually became very good. Without that chapter, the rest does not happen. 2,000 horsepower from an English Electric 16 SVT engine. Not the most powerful, not the most modern, but there first, doing the job, proving mainline diesel could actually work. The Class 40's distinctive whistling roar at full power became the soundtrack of express travel in Britain in the 1960s and early 70s. An entire generation of British railway passengers learned what a diesel express sounded like through the Class 40. That sound made the locomotive, and in preservation, it still does. And the final two entries are not just iconic locomotives. They are the machines that defined what British high-speed rail became. Number 3, Class 66, General Motors JT42, CWR 1998. The Class 66 is not British. Designed and built in Canada by General Motors, shipped across the Atlantic, it produces 3,300 horsepower from a General Motors 12 and 710 3B engine. Enthusiasts debate whether it belongs on a list like this. The freight operators who depend on it every single day do not have that debate. Over 500 have operated in Britain, more than any other diesel freight class since the Class 47. They haul stone, coal, intermodal containers, automotive trains, and almost everything else that moves by freight train on the national network. They are reliable to a degree that genuinely surprised everyone who had dealt with the maintenance demands of earlier British freight power. The Class 66 is to British freight what the EMDSD 40-2 was to American freight. Not glamorous. The locomotive that actually moves the country. Impact is what iconic means. And the Class 66's impact on British freight has been enormous. Number 2, Class 43, HST Power Car, High-Speed Train 1975. In 1976, British Rail put a train into regular passenger service between London and Bristol at 125 miles per hour, every day on the timetable as a matter of ordinary operation. The InterCity 125, built around pairs of Class 43 power cars at each end of a fixed rake of coaches, became the fastest diesel passenger train in the world. It held that record for nearly 40 years. Think about what happened in those 40 years. The internet was invented, the smartphone arrived, humanity sequenced the human genome, and the fastest diesel passenger train in the world was still the one British Rail introduced in 1976. Over 200 Class 43 power cars were built. Some are still in passenger service today, nearly 50 years after entry into traffic. The high-speed train did not just move passengers faster, it rebuilt confidence in British Rail at a time when that confidence had almost run out. It made people choose the train again. Number 1, Class 55 Deltic. What it actually meant. The Deltic sits at number 1 not just because of what it was, but because of what it proved. In 1961, British Rail put a locomotive on the East Coast Main Line, producing 3,300 horsepower. More powerful than any diesel in regular passenger service anywhere in the world at that moment. More powerful than anything the Americans were running. More powerful than anything in France or Germany. The most powerful diesel passenger locomotive on Earth was running between London and Edinburgh. And it looked like it belonged there. The English electric nose, the long clean flanks, those Napier Deltic engines at full chat through Doncaster or York on a northbound express. 22 built, 6 survived. Every time one of those 6 runs today, the platform fills up. The Deltic is number 1 because it answered the question nobody had quite dared to ask out loud. Not whether British diesel could work, whether it could be world-class. The answer was yes. 3,300 horsepower, all the way to Edinburgh and back. 10 British Rail diesel locomotives, from the indestructible Class 20 to the world-beating Deltic. Some still run. Some left sounds in the landscape that an entire generation of British people carry without quite knowing why. Which one would you most want to ride behind? Drop it in the comments. If you enjoy the machines that shaped how Britain moved, subscribe, because there is a lot more of this history still to cover.